Hi, it's me again, Brodie McLeod. I've actually got a bit of sunshine shining through my window this afternoon in room 2 at the lodge in Signet Custoke, Weston-super-Mare. I've been really worried watching the news and listening to the news on my Alexa, and really concerned about the future. And I think that one of the things that's kind of prominently stuck with me in my 20s was a lot of kind of conspiratorial and kind of vaguely well cited but sort of alarmist rhetoric about the wars in the Middle East and the sort of war against what some people said was just like a war against Islam, and the way that that exploited national kind of identities and sort of resource dependencies, just like they've done with kind of coltan in Africa. There's been resources obviously acquired and massive geopolitical shifts since the invasion, the initial Gulf War and the war in sort of, the noughties, the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. There was a lot of dissenting voices talking about the way that our industrial military complex and also our economic system was looking to, like Saddam Hussein was wanting to get rid of, stop using the petrodollar. And that was one of the things that kind of they said was like one of the motivating, wipe the lens here, I think I can see some stuff on there. They said was like one of the motivating things, and I don't really know much about geopolitics or international relations. I haven't done a degree. I haven't got a degree. I've not even got really any GCSEs. And so I've just asked, I'm learning a bit about neoliberalism at the moment. So I just asked Gemini this, and that's what's going to be the topic of the video today. So what exactly is neoliberalism? Why is it considered to be a bad thing? And how can its disadvancements be contextualised or regarded within the scope of the West's current military conflagration with Iran? Is this war purely reactionary, or could the progression of potentially toxic political ideologies be constituent of the motives of the West, as it has with previous wars in the Middle East? Or would you say the progression of neoliberal expansionist capitalism has absolutely nothing to do with the mobilisation and systematic dismantling of the Iranian domestic infrastructure currently unfolding? It said it's important to preface this by stating that the situation with Iran is highly complex, with a multitude of factors at play. Attributing it to a single cause or ideology would be an oversimplification. I mean, I would agree. However, we can explore how neoliberalism is defined, its criticisms, and how its concepts might be considered within the broader geopolitical context of Western interventions in the Middle East, including the ongoing tensions with Iran. So to start off, what exactly is neoliberalism? Neoliberalism is a political and economic ideology that gained significant prominence from the late 20th century onwards. While there are multiple, sometimes competing definitions, at its core, neoliberalism advocates for free market capitalism, which people think is a good thing. The belief that markets are the most efficient mechanism for allocating resources, promoting growth and securing individual liberty. Deregulation, reducing government interference and restrictions on businesses and financial markets. Privatisation, transferring ownership and control of public services and state-owned enterprises to the private sector. And reduced government spending, emphasising austerity and cuts to social welfare programmes and public works. Free trade and globalisation, lowering free trade, lowering trade barriers and promoting the integration of national economies into a global market. In also individual responsibilities, shifting the focus from collective social welfare to individual self-reliance. Essentially, neoliberalism aims to extend competitive market principles into all areas of life, minimising the role of the state in the economy and society. I mean, it hasn't worked, basically. That's, the bottom line. Why is it considered to be a bad thing? Neoliberalism faces significant criticism, often centred on its social and economic consequences. Increased inequality. Critics argue that neoliberal policies such as tax cuts for the wealthy and deregulation exacerbate income disparities, leading to concentration of wealth and power at the top while the poor and middle class struggle. Erosion of democratic institutions. The prioritisation of corporate interests and wealthy individuals can undermine the ability of governments to regulate and provide essential services, leading to a decline in public trust and the rise of an anti-democratic movement. Financial instability. Contrary to claims of promoting stability, some argue that capital deregulation has led to increased financial instability and economic crises. Harm to public services. Applying free market approaches to essential public services like healthcare in education can lead to underfunding, reduced access and increased inequality in these crucial sectors. Worker exploitation and job insecurity. Neoliberal policies often lead to labour market flexibilisation, which can result in reduced workers' rights, job insecurity and the outsourcing of jobs. Environmental degradation. The emphasis on unchecked economic growth and deregulation can lead to less environmental protection and increased ecological damage. Social fragmentation. By emphasising individual responsibility and market relations, neoliberalism can actually weaken social cohesion and community bonds. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate economist, famously stated that neoliberalism is an economic system that is designed to redistribute wealth upwards. So, next bit. How can its advancements be contextualised or regarded within the scope of the West's current military conflagration with Iran? Is this war purely reactionary, or could the progression of potentially toxic political ideologies be constituent of the motives of the West, as it has with previous wars in the Middle East? Or would you say the progression of neoliberal expansionist capitalism has nothing to do with the mobilisation and systematic dismantling of the Iranian domestic infrastructure currently unfolding? It's crucial to acknowledge that current geopolitical events, including tensions with Iran, are multi-layered and cannot be reduced to a single ideological driver. However, the progression of neoliberal expansionist capitalism is often cited by critical scholars as a significant, though not always direct or sole, factor in Western foreign policy and military interventions, including in resource-rich regions like the Middle East. Here's how its advancements might be contextualised in relation to the current situation with Iran. Resource control and market access. The Middle East holds a significant portion of the world's oil and gas reserves. Neoliberal expansionism, with its emphasis on free markets, open trade and private enterprise, inherently seeks to ensure access to and control over vital resources and markets. From this perspective, any state or system that challenges this openness, for example, through nationalisation of resources, state-controlled economies or independent foreign policy, can be seen as an impediment to global capitalist expansion. Iran, with its substantial oil reserves and an anti-Western state-controlled economy, could be viewed through this lens as a barrier to certain economic interests. Regime change, always a big one, and market integration. Historically, some argue that Western interventions, especially after the Cold War, have aimed to transform states into more market-friendly entities. This involves encouraging privatisation, deregulation and integration into the global capitalist system. Regimes perceived as hostile to these principles or as supporting alternative economic models like Iran's revolutionary economy might be seen as targets for regime change or destabilisation, even if the state's reasons are different, e.g. human rights, terrorism or nuclear proliferation. The systematic dismantling of Iranian domestic infrastructure could, from this perspective, be seen as a way to weaken the state's control and open up opportunities for private capital and Western influence in a post-conflict scenario. Debt, sanctions and economic pressure. Even without direct military conflict, the tools of neoliberal governance, such as international financial institutions, IMF, the World Bank, and economic sanctions are often used to pressure countries to adopt neoliberal reforms. Sanctions against Iran, while often framed in terms of its nuclear program or regional actions, also have the effect of isolating its economy, creating internal pressures and potentially weakening the state's ability to resist external pressures for liberalisation. Some scholars argue that economic warfare is a form of silent intervention designed to achieve neoliberal objectives. Security and stabilisation for capital flows. Neoliberalism thrives in stable environments where capital can flow freely and investments are secure. Regions perceived as unstable or threatening to global supply chains and investments can become targets for intervention in the name of security or stability. This often involves military presence or action. The argument here is that the war on terror or other security narratives can serve to justify interventions that ultimately protect or create conditions favourable for neoliberal economic activities. Historical precedents. Looking at previous wars in the Middle East, such as the Iraq War, some analysis point to underlying economic motives related to oil and the desire to reshape the region into a more amenable environment for Western economic interests. While the stated reasons were WMDs and democracy, critics argue that the long-term goal included integrating Iraq into the global capitalist system under Western influence. This historical context leads to question whether similar, albeit perhaps less overt economic motives are at play in the current tensions with Iran. Is the current conflict purely reactionary? It is highly unlikely that any major international conflict is purely reactionary. Geopolitics is a complex interplay of historical grievances, security concerns, economic interests, domestic politics, and ideological frameworks. While immediate events and perceived threats, for example, Iran's nuclear program and regional proxy conflicts and human rights issues, might trigger specific responses, it's rare that these operate in a vacuum. So the progression of potentially toxic political ideologies, including certain interpretations and applications of neoliberalism, could indeed be constituents of the motives of the West, as it has been with previous wars in the Middle East. It's not necessarily a direct, explicit war for neoliberalism, but rather the advancement of neoliberal expansionist capitalism creates a framework wherein certain states, just like Iran, are seen as obstacles, and their weakening or transformation becomes a strategic objective. Therefore, to say that neoliberal expansionist capitalism has absolutely nothing to do with the mobilisation and systematic dismantling of the Iranian domestic infrastructure currently unfolding would likely be a simplistic and incomplete analysis. While direct causation is difficult to prove definitively and other factors are undeniably at play, the pursuit of global economic integration, market access, and the desire to dismantle systems perceived as anti-ethical to free market principles can certainly be considered a contributing, albeit often understated, dimension of Western engagement and conflict in the region. Like I said, I know nothing about geopolitics or international relations, really. I do know a little bit. I know enough to form, opinion, but it might be a kind of ill-informed opinion. I don't know. I mean, tell me what you think. I don't really have the answers to this one. I don't think that they're just kind of invading the Middle East again. I think that, they're responding to terrorism. Like, do you know what I mean? And when people are committing really, really, really sort of provocative military action against a certain, financial or economic power, then you've got to expect, some kind of retaliatory conflagration to probably unfold. It would be naive to think that it wouldn't. They're not going to kind of like just roll over and, wait for it all to blow over. They need to kind of, I've seen people in Iran holding signs like Iranians support Israel. And I don't know if these are propagandist things or whether there is generally, there is a lot of liberal people, not neoliberal, but liberal people in Iran who don't like the regime. They don't like the oppression. And I don't know how those dissenting voices are viewed and treated. They're pretty harsh in Iran. They're quite heavy on the censorship and this kind of top-down, Sharia law bullshit. But I also think that they've got a right to, it says in the rule book, they've been saying on the World Service, on my Alexa, they've been saying that in the rule book it says you should never, ever, ever strike a nuclear site. You just don't do it. If the IAEA have been in and conducted their inspections and they've ticked all the boxes and everything's all right, you never strike Chernobyl. I mean, it's should seem obvious, and they're still doing that. At the moment, they're still targeting more. They're considering getting the Americans in because they've got the only bunker busters that could target the subterranean Iranian uranium refinery facilities, and you're not supposed to do that. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. I was saying to my cab driver on the way back from my brother's birthday, I feel like in the West we have a voice, and I feel like we've got freedom of speech, and I feel like, if I remain silent and I don't, at least make some sort of noise about it, whether that's kind of like on social media like I am now, or kind of by attending a protest or doing something. I mean, it's like doing nothing. Silence is complicity, I think. And the main problem, I think, is misinformation. Not that people are being subject to, intentional misinformation, but I think that most people don't really know what they're talking about. And the elephant in the room is classified shit, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? The Foo Fighters, the band, was named after these things, that the RAF and the Allied forces, they were out in dogfights and they were completely outmaneuvered, outgunned, out everything by these glowing German aircraft, which, could move in, incredibly agile flight patterns, and they had absolutely no idea what they were. They got nicknamed by the pilots Foo Fighters, and the project was classified, Operation Paperclip, where the, Nazi scientists were absorbed into the American regime, is like the official conspiracy theory. I mean, yes, V2 rockets were early ICBMs and they were advanced technology, but we all know that, anti-gravity technology is really what was being, foisted by the German regime, and that's how they actually, I believe won the war, and continued, the what happened with the bunker with Hitler and Eva Braun is highly contentious, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and I don't know really, what the truth is around that whole thing. But what I do know is that there is, what about anti-gravity? What about the secret space programs? What about the fusion reactors? What has, if anyone's got classified weaponry, it's Israel, right? Do you know what I mean? Like they get billions in military aid from all over the world. All, America and NATO and the United States and the United Kingdom, America and the United States, all the Allied forces are on their side. If there's people never talk in these wars, they never really talk about, okay, what about the stuff that we know nothing about? Do you know what I mean? Like, what about all the shit that must be at play here? All of the secret classified facilities that must exist within the Iranian regime. Like, maybe they do have a nuke that we don't know about. Maybe Mossad know about that, and that's why they're trying to bomb them back into the Stone Age. Why, would it be acceptable to think that Israel having nukes is not a kind of like, as well as some sort of Tesla death ray or a super advanced anti-gravity spacecraft fleet, you know what I mean, that can go all over the place. It just, I think that, like, having an opinion, like, I've only just got a barely educated opinion, and then there are people who have studied far more than me who know a lot better what they're talking about. But I think that there's a juxtaposition between using your voice and using your voice to voice opinions of others, which you don't really know whether they're fucking talking shit or not. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not that they're talking shit, but they're just, people don't really have the autonomy or the kind of the access to the raw nuts and bolts data, like the Home Office and MI6 and Interpol and Europol and the NCA, the FBI and the NSA don't do their research on Google. There's some stuff that just isn't on Google. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's some stuff that just, like, you can't read about it in any blog or vlog or YouTube video or fucking grainy fucking pixelated website. I mean, who knows? Maybe the dark web is a bit more of a source of information, than I understand. I've never used the dark web. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really interested in buying, hand grenades or child porn or, narcotics, but, like, I don't kind of, I don't know. Like, I just don't really know how, people are not kind of looking at this elephant in the room like I am and thinking, what about all the shit? There must be, like, if anyone's got a space program, it's like Israel, innit? I mean, surely if they've anyone with a secret classified space program that we know nothing about, with super weapons that are all powerful, they're talking about nuclear weapons, but there must be so much more shit out there that's way worse and a lot more dangerous. And everyone, no journalist or media outlet is talking about, as much as there might be a kind of expansionist regime and, an empirical, Western imperialistic motivation to make money on a kind of superficial surface level, over and above that, there's also this narrative of, like, like, what about all the technology we know nothing about? What about that? I don't know. I just don't know what to make of it, but all I can see is people talking on the radio and talking on the news and, posting in the blogosphere and online. Not that I read any blogs talking about the fucking blogosphere. That's just horseshit. Like, I mean, talking about what I've seen, on Facebook and Twitter, basically, and on Instagram, people kind of, like, saying that Iran don't pose a threat, and which is a bit absurd because obviously they have been, striking, and they've both been, Israel and Iran over the last 3 or 4 days have been exchanging fire between each other, and things are really starting to reach a point of tension. And it's horrible seeing it and hearing about it, and, like, I'm really scared for, World War III. I don't want World War III to happen. And, I guess in using my voice, it's not that I'm kind of sticking up for either side necessarily. I'm just sort of saying that people need to, more than anything, appreciate their own ignorance and realise that there's some shit that we just don't know anything about, you know what I mean? And if you, like, don't know anything about something, then don't start putting your life on the line or, compromising your integrity or your kind of, moral or intellectual capacity and, I don't know, just don't sort of rally behind something when it could just be so different to what we think it is. There could be all sorts of shit in Iran and Israel that none of us know anything about, and nobody's saying that. So that's what I'm saying today. You know, neoliberalism for a part. The West have always wanted to invade the Middle East. They keep fucking doing it. Been doing it for fucking decades, and all they do every time is bullshit everybody. Watch The War You Don't See with John Pilger. He's a great journalist, and you know, does a great expose on the way that the media has sold various invasions into the Middle East, you know, under different brands. We watched Four Lions the other day when I went to my brother's for his birthday. It's been taken off Netflix soon, so give that a watch. It's extremely poor taste. Like, it's very kind of like, with the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, you know, there really is nothing funny about Islamic extremism. But Chris Morris actually plays off the moral and social juxtapositions and the kind of the argument behind homegrown terrorism in a way that makes you question the motives. And like Riz Ahmed, who's in the movie, check out his spoken word poem. It's called Sour Times. You can listen to it on YouTube. I'll try and find a link, put it in the description. And that's about homegrown radicalized people. And I think that, you know, extremism is just such a kind of toxic ideology. And I think there's extremists in the West and there's extremists in the Middle East. And both of them want shutting the fuck down and, you know, fucking off. But like, both of them are going to be at the behest of technologies and situations that even the most educated and succinct political orators, the Owen Jones, the anybody you see on Russell Brand's channel, you know, Mr. Kennedy, like any of these orators, you know, Noam Chomsky, bless him, can't do much anymore because he's too past it now. But I'm sure if he could right now, he'd be, you know, I'm wondering if he's written anything about what's going on at the moment. It would be great to hear his perspective because he's always had a really good way of looking at things. And I don't. I'm not a genius like in international relations and, you know, warfare. I just want peace for everybody. I just don't want anybody else to get hurt. I don't want anyone else to die, and I don't want World War III to happen. And I just want everybody to be peaceful, and, you know, all I really want is peace. But I just can't help but feel that everybody's just kind of like completely ignoring this kind of like, have you thought about, right, stuff that might be classified? Have you think about what Black Ops, like what about stuff that's like, you know, government secrets? Do you think any of this might have a military context? Like, do you think this might be relevant within the kind of like the military power play and the way this works? Or do you think that there just isn't anything that we don't know about, and that there isn't technology that's like decades ahead of what we've got? You know, did they have AI back in 2010 like I've got it on my phone now? You know, did they have, you know, anti-gravity spacecrafts in the days when they were, you know, claiming to be using V2 rockets as early ICBMs in the Second World War? It's like, you answer these questions, kind of ask AI these questions. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't know that you're going to get a definitive answer from anywhere, because you're not supposed to be able to, and that's the way that it's structured. But just try and think about stuff that we know nothing about, rather than getting so kind of consumed by the things that we do know something about. And the nuts and bolts stuff we can see. Think about the stuff that we don't see and we don't know anything about, and how big that must be, and how things like sort of cold fusion and anti-gravity and stuff like that probably does exist. It must do. Do you know what I mean? Like, and for us to just think that this war between these two superpowers is not going to inculcate relevance of these things beyond our comprehension or understanding or rational, legitimate critique, you know, is naive. But anyway, hope you have a nice day in the sunshine. Go and have a beer in the garden, listening to the BBC, and maybe read some conspiracy theories about advanced classified technology, because, like, you know, I'm sure that that's the elephant in the room. It's what nobody's thinking about, nobody's talking about, and nobody's reading anything about, because no one's really writing anything about it, because the only people that do know about it would just get fucking shot in the skull if they ever open their mouths. And it's like the most relevant point. It's the most relevant factor. Like, stuff that's classified is really important, and there's got to be lots of it.